Hey everybody, welcome back to our in-depth look at the major characters in the upcoming Warlords of Draenor expansion. Today we're going to take a look at an orc who Chris Metzen described as, quote, even when he doesn't have demon piss in his veins, he's still a lot of fun at parties. This orc currently leads the Iron Horde as it marches towards Azeroth's destruction, and is responsible for spawning everyone's favorite character of all time, and former war chief, Garrosh. His name is Grom Hellscream. Grommash, meaning the Giant's Heart in Orcish, was an amazingly powerful blade master and chieftain of the Warsong clan on Draenor. And as all the rest of the clans and chieftains did, Grom and the Warsong clan attended the Kusharg festival at their sacred mountain of Oshu'gun. Fast forward some years later, and the beginnings of the orcs' control by the Legion has already begun. Ner'zhul has already been contacted by Kil'jaeden, had his moment of doubt, and was usurped by Gul'dan. Gul'dan, now in control of the clans, had commissioned massive arenas where orcs honed their skills in trials of combat. Certain chieftains, such as Drek'thar, began seeing these things and where down the road they could lead, and began to speak out against Gul'dan and the Shadow Council's activities. Unfortunately, their words fell on deaf ears as the more warrior-based and stronger chieftains, like Grom and his Warsong clan, stepped forward to champion this new vision of the orcs. As the bloodthirstiness of the orcs began growing, so did the suspicions about Grom and his rise to power in leadership. Unlike most of the chieftains who achieved their position through heredity, whispers flew that Grom usurped the position by killing his former chieftain. However, few would willingly challenge the uncontested leader of the Warsong clan, marked by his slim build, black tattooed jaw, ear-splitting shriek of a battle cry, and his axe gore howl. The axe has a wickedly curved blade with 2 notches in it, which, when swung, causes the axe to sing its own battle cry, which gave the weapon its name. When Ner'zhul first warned the chieftains about the danger of the Draenor, Grom was the first to agree to go to war with the alien neighbors, and likewise, when Gul'dan offered the chieftains the blood of Manaroth, Grom was the first to indulge in its power. In fact, his action of drinking the blood inspired many of the orcs to do so as well. He participated in the final battle against the Draenor at their capital of Shattrath City, and actually during that conflict came to blows with an at-the-time paladin version of Nabundo. Unfortunately, as you know by now, the Draenor could not stand against the orcs, and the city fell. Victorious now over their enemy, Gul'dan knew his time to combine the orcs had come. He united the once warring clans into the unstoppable orcish horde. However, the horde needed a leader, a figure they could rally behind. But Gul'dan wasn't that orc and didn't want to be. But if he allowed a leader to simply emerge victorious after a contest of power, somebody like Grom or Orgrim Doomhammer would emerge, somebody he could not control. As a result, Gul'dan engineered Blackhand into the position of war chief. With the Draenor finished, Gul'dan reveled in the horde's power, but he knew that without any enemies to fight, the horde would collapse in on itself. Luckily, his answers came in the form of Medivh, the last guardian, who wished to bring the horde to Azeroth. The first and second wars would come and go, as many of you already know, and through Gul'dan manipulating the situation, Grom and the Warsong actually stayed behind on Draenor for both of these wars, and was ultimately spared defeat at the hands of the Alliance of Lordaeron. And as happened with the first and second wars, Gul'dan's death in the Tomb of Sargeras also occurred with Grom on Draenor, and eventually Ner'zhul would take control of the remnants of the Horde. With their planet dying and at the behest of Terran Gorfin, the first Orc Death Knight, Ner'zhul devised a plan to create portals off of Draenor and onto other worlds. But in order to do so, he needed some very specific magical artifacts. Ner'zhul utilized Grom and the Warsong clan, as well as Kil'jaeden Deadeye and the Bleeding Hollow, Kargath Bladefist and the Shattered Hand, as well as Terran Gorfin to obtain these artifacts. Grom was actually the one responsible for tracking down the skull of Gul'dan. It was in the possession of Hurkran's Skullsplitter, the chieftain of the lesser orc clan, the Bone Chewers, who wore the skull as a trophy, ignorant of its actual power. Grom killed him and demanded his replacement, Tagar Spinebreaker, to pledge fealty to the remnants of the Horde. Ner'zhul would, in a way, succeed in his plan, with the Alliance expedition, which would be known in the future as the Sons of Lothar, chasing Ner'zhul and his group south to Black Temple. More and more of the Orc Shaman's forces would be lost, including Kil'jaeden Deadeye, Kargath Bladefist, and a majority of their clans. Grom, meanwhile, was still on Azeroth with his Warsong clan, and it is on Azeroth that they would be stuck. With Khadgar closing the portal from Draenor's side, the Orc chieftain was forced into hiding in the wilds of Lordaeron. It was here that they eked out an existence on the edge of human civilization for 15 years, during which Grom struggled with the demonic curse he helped inspire his race to inflict upon themselves. With their way home cut off, these orcs who hid in the wilds of Azeroth or imprisoned in the alliance of Lord'aran's internment camps fell into a deep lethargy. The Grom was one of the few orcs who managed to fight off the withdrawal effects of the demonic curse, but his clan did not. Slowly they were dying off, and the newer, younger, and weaker generations of the Warsong were unable to survive in the wilds of Azeroth. All seemed lost until Grom was sought out by a young orc, grown up in human captivity, but escaped and fought against them now. Thrall. Grom took Thrall under his wing, teaching him Orcish, and finally revealing where he came from. Based on the cloth that was wrapped around him as an infant, Grom told Thrall he belonged to the exiled Frostwolf clan, and then Thrall left him to search for his people in the Alterac Mountains. After Thrall found Drek'thar, learned the ways of shamanism, and eventually found Orgrim Doomhammer after the Warchief arrived at the Frostwolf camp, Grom and his Warsong clan reunited with them. Together, they all fought against the human internment camps surrounding Durnhold Keep, and sought to free and reinvigorate the orcs on Azeroth. Doomhammer would inevitably die while freeing the camp now known as Hammerfall, and with his dying breath appointed Thrall as the new war chief of the Horde in his place, and gave him his armor and his signature hammer. Thrall and Grom spent much time together following this, and the two gathered the dispersed forces of the Horde across Lordaeron. But a little while later, when Thrall was on his own with a small force in the Arathi Highlands, he received a vision from the mysterious prophet telling him to abandon Lordaeron and travel west across the sea to Kalimdor. After gathering his forces and freeing Grom, who had just been captured by some Lord'arani forces, they set out across the sea for Kalimdor. A group of ships, including Thrall's, were beset by a fierce storm near the Maelstrom, forcing them to take shelter on a nearby island. This encounter would ultimately end with Vol'jin and the Dark Spirituals joining Thrall and traveling the rest of the way west with them to Kalimdor. For Grom and his forces, however, they avoided the storm and landed before Thrall. It is unknown specifically what they were doing between Thrall joining back up with them, but they eventually would travel to the Stone Talon Mountains and set up shop, coming in direct contact with humans led by Jaina Proudmoore, who had also received a vision from the prophet and telling her to take her forces west. Meanwhile, Thrall had landed and encountered Cairn Bloodhoof and the Tauren, and helped them defend their homes from the raging centaur, before setting off in search of Grom and his forces. Grom and his forces and Thrall and his forces would eventually reunite in Stone Talon Mountains after Thrall witnessed Grom leading an attack on a human settlement. He confronted his friend about what had occurred and specifically forbid him from attacking the humans, while he had his scouts find a way to pass through Stone Talon Peak. Despite this, Grom still ended up leading an attack on Jaina's forces. Reluctantly, Thrall battled the humans, and together their forces reached Stone Talon Peak, and it was here that Thrall scolded his friend about what he had done. Grom responded by cryptically saying he could feel the demons that once enslaved his race coming near again, and it appeared as if that had been reawakening his blood curse. After regaining his composure, he told Thrall he could handle this little issue, but Thrall wouldn't take that chance. He commanded Grom to go north into Ashenvale Forest and build the Horde a lumber-gathering settlement. But Ashenvale wasn't unoccupied. The Night Elves saw what Grom's newly created settlement was doing, and were angered at them cutting down so many trees in their sacred forest. The Night Elves attacked without explanation, and Grom fought them off with the help of a goblin, who gave him some shredders. Before I continue, it should be noted that this specific first interaction between Night Elf and Orcs would resonate all the way up until current times in the lore as a key contention between the Alliance and the Horde. After Grom stayed off the Night Elves and gathered some lumber he needed to support Thrall's efforts, the Warsong chieftain caught the ire of the Night Elves' demigod Cenarius. Cenarius was determined to avenge the death of the Night Elves and protect the forest from further desecration. Attacking Grom's outlying camps, he called the orcs demon-spawned wretches, suggesting he knew something of their history, and began annihilating Grom's forces. During one skirmish, Grom tried to convince Cenarius that they no longer served demons, but the demigod did not listen. It was also clear that Cenarius could not be injured by any conventional attacks, and the death at his hands seemed inevitable. But then one of Grom's troll witch doctors told him he sensed strange energies nearby that would be able to aid them in fighting off the demigod. When Grom investigated this, he found a fountain of blood, and shortly before he had arrived here, Manaroth, the same pit lord whose blood was used to enslave the orcs originally, was summoned to Azeroth as a result of the Burning Legion's invasion. Manaroth, at the behest of Tychondrius, a dreadlord, traveled to Kalimdor in search of the orcs and spilled his blood into the pool in a plan to re-enslave them and use them to kill off Cenarius, who was a significant obstacle standing in the Legion's way in invading Kalimdor. Grom was ignorant of whose blood it actually was, but the same witch doctor did tell him that the fountain contained demonic energies. One of the orcs under Grom's command spoke up and said if they drank from this fountain, they would go against everything Thrall had been teaching them. Grom disregarded this, seeing as it a power source that could save him and his clan from Cenarius. He drank from the fountain and persuaded or forced the rest of his troops to do the same. Empowered even further by demonic energies, Grom and his forces actually became fell orcs and soon began fighting back against Cenarius. Grom and the Warsong clan's power was no match for Cenarius and his night elves, and soon his forces were pushed back entirely, and Grom even met and slew the demigod on the battlefield at the conclusion of the conflict. But immediately after his death, Manaroth appeared and informed Grom that he and his clan were once again susceptible to his control. Grom was horrified, but that horror was his last independent thought before Manaroth took control and turned him and his clan into his slaves. This made Grom hate Thrall, the rest of the Horde, and made him wage war on Jaina and her forces as he did before. But at this point, Thrall, Jaina, and Cairn had met inside Stone Talon Peak, and the Prophet revealed himself to be none other than the spirit of Medivh, the last Guardian. Medivh convinced the orcs, the humans, and the Tauren to ally against the Burning Legion, but sadly had to inform Thrall that his friend had been corrupted by Manaroth, and the Legion as well. Jaina offered Thrall a ritual to cleanse Grom, and Thrall and Cairn fought against Grom and his fellow orcs. When Thrall met Grom face to face, Grom finally revealed the horrible truth that he had kept from him, that the orc chieftains had willingly taken the blood of Manaroth the first time. They weren't so much cursed as they were doomed by the willing choices they made by their power-hungry leaders. Grom would eventually fall to Thrall and his forces, and the war chief brought his corrupted friend to Jaina's arcane ritual circle. Together with Jaina and her magic users alongside Thrall's, they performed the ritual that cleansed him of the blood curse. Thrall then told Grom all that occurred during his enslavement, and Manaroth demanded they meet him in a nearby canyon. Thrall and Grom set out to kill Manaroth and end him once and for all, and after arriving at what in the future would be called Demon Fall Canyon, the Pit Lord revealed himself.
So predictable. I knew you would come. And I see you brought the mighty Hellscream. His blood is mine. As is your whole misbegotten race. The boy believed you could be saved, but he didn't know what burns within your soul. When in your heart, you know we are the same. The blood haze has lifted. The demon's fire has burnt out in my veins. I have freed myself. No, old friend. You've freed us all.
With Grom's final act, every orc who drank the blood of Manoroth found the curse was finally lifted, and they were freed from the shackles of demonic corruption. Gul'dan's act of ultimate treachery was finally undone. Thrall took the famous axe that slew Manoroth with him back to Drek'thar, and honored Grom's memory by dubbing the hall in Orgrimmar where he would hold court Grommash Hall. Despite being the one who ultimately cleansed the blood curse from his people, Grom became a center of debate in orc culture. He is generally viewed as a hero and a savior. However, he was also the very first chieftain to readily agree and eagerly partake in Manoroth's blood, and true, his participation also caused many of the orcs to do so. And not only did he partake in Manoroth's blood, he did so twice, once on Draenor and again in Ashenvale. To the Night Elves, they see Grom's act of killing Cenarius the ultimate betrayal. A slight that the orcs even forced further when they refused to claim responsibility for Grom's actions. They reasoned that it was not the orcs that killed Cenarius, but fellow orcs, and that the orcs were forced to kill their own wayward brethren. They logicked that by taking responsibility for Grom's actions, the orcs would be acknowledging that they are still in the old horde. Regardless, Grom left major waves in other ways. He had a son, Garrosh, who was ill with the Redpox disease the entirety of the First and Second War. As such, Garrosh remained in the town of Garradar in Nagrand. He had heard of his father's exploits through second and third-hand means, and fell into a deep depression when he believed his father had cursed his entire race to ruin. As most of you know by now, we meet up with Garrosh during the events of the Burning Crusade, where Thrall finally convinces him that Grom had died a hero. And the rest, with Garrosh returning to Azeroth, going to Northrend, being promoted Warchief by Thrall, inciting the Horde and the Alliance into war, and ultimately being defeated at Orgrimmar after absorbing the powers of Yisaraj's heart, as they say, is history. It is because of Grom and how he attributed to his race's destiny that caused Garrosh to act and rule in the way that he did. It remained with the younger Hellscream until he discarded it on Pandaria, after creating a more powerful version of it with the powers of the dead old god Yisaraj. It is unknown what happened to Gorhal after this. Finally, Grom's resting place remained in the canyon where he struck down Manoroth. It was renamed Demonfall Canyon, and there was a monument erected there by Thrall. The monument's inscription reads as such: "Here lies Grommash Hellscream, chieftain of the Warsong clan. In many ways, the curse of our people began and ended with Grom. His name meant Giant's Heart in our ancient tongue. He earned that name 100-fold as he stood alone before the demon Manoroth, and won our freedom with his blood. Loktar Ogar, big brother, may the Warsong never fade. Thrall, Warchief of the Horde." On Draenor, Grom is very much as dangerous, ruthless, powerful, and cunning as he was in our universe. The bonus to him, and to our detriment, is that he is now the leader of the Iron Horde. We do not know how he has arrived at the position of Warchief, whether Garrosh had something to do with that considering he's his father, or he simply won after a contest of power, but I assume we'll learn why he was chosen during the expansion storyline nonetheless. And despite his current status as Warchief of the Iron Horde, he is still chieftain of the Warsong clan in this universe. On Draenor, the Warsong originated in Nagrand, and that is where they primarily are focused still. Unlike our universe, though, this version of Grom and the Warsong clan are primarily Deadeye archers and wolf riders, gathering at the vanguard of the Iron Horde. They raze their enemies' lands and homes to embers, and then stamp those embers into ash. Chris Metzen described them as akin to the Mongols. And that is essentially all we know of Grom and his clan thus far. It will certainly be interesting to see the dynamic between Grom and his alternate universe son. Honestly, there's not much I'm wishing for Grom. He basically is there to serve his purpose. He is arguably the most imposingly threatening warlord that we can see initially. I say the most imposingly threatening because it's pretty obvious that Ner'zhul and Gul'dan are probably more dangerous and powerful than Grom, all things considered. But if you have a split second to relay information on who is the most dangerous, Grom is probably the more immediately dangerous looking. As I said, Grom is there to serve his purpose. He's the leader of the Iron Horde, and he's bought into Garrosh's words regarding Azeroth, and he's keeping together this very diverse group of orcs. Personally, the only thing I really wish to know about Grom is that he's ultimately the one who kills Garrosh. If I had to predict how this expansion will play out, it would be thusly. 6.0 will see us killing Blackhand, who is the final boss of the second and final raid tier Blackrock Foundry. We'll also be killing Kargath Bladefist, who we have learned from data mined information is present in the first tier of this raid, Heimal, out of the 7 warlords that already takes out 2 of them. And then we have Gul'dan, who isn't even part of the Iron Horde, and Ner'zhul, who may or may not die after his part in the story. Together, they're another 2. That's already 4 out of the 7 warlords, or should I say 6 warlords, because Durotan isn't even in the Iron Horde. All that leaves then is Kil'jaeden Deadeye. Arguably, it's very likely that after 6.0 is through, only Grom and Kil'jaeden Deadeye will be left as warlords in the Iron Horde, assuming Kil'jaeden doesn't die during the Tanaan Jungle story. I would predict that following this, Gul'dan will approach Grom and say, "Look dude, we're obviously not winning, and if you want to stop your enemies, I have this particular type of energy that can help you out," and offer him the demon blood. Because we know this is still Gul'dan's goal to subjugate the orcs into the Burning Legion as he does in our timeline, and we already saw that Grom, even after knowing the devastating negative side effects of using demon energy, still chose to drink it in our universe if it could stop Cenarius. I could easily see him drinking the blood. Just replace Cenarius with the Alliance and Horde. Out of desperation, Grom will drink the blood of Manaroth, or whatever demon, and Garrosh will try to stop him. Garrosh will try to save his father and ultimately be killed by him. Frankly, I think it's a great conclusion to the character of Garrosh. After all of the terrible things he's done in order to recreate his version of the Orcish history that never even happened, he dies having failed to stop his father from doing what he was most ashamed of him doing in his youth. After this, it's pretty clear that Grom will be the final boss in the 6.2 raid tier. We know that from screenshots at BlizzCon that says Shattrath is currently scheduled as a raid. And it's pretty likely that Shattrath will be the second raid tier, since that leaves Gul'dan or Kil'jaeden and the Legion or Kairaz or Wrathion or whoever else as the final bosses for 6.4, assuming that there's only 3 tiers of raids this expansion. Whether or not Grom lives after his defeat in 6.2 is pretty irrelevant to me. I personally don't care much, but if you had to force me to answer, I'd say I hope he dies, because if not, he'll be redeemed and end up joining Thrall's horde. And I am already adamantly against this idea that they're pretty obviously going to force down our throats. I'm already positive that Durotan will join his son, and probably Orgrim Doomhammer too, in joining his horde and coming back with us to Azeroth. God forbid we actually show the Alliance as the dominant faction and the Horde as the weak one, before we give the Horde all these old awesome heroes from this new universe. And there we go, that's the Grom Hellscream episode. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you have any questions or believe I've gotten something wrong, be sure to leave them in the comments below. Also, let me know what you think of Grom Hellscream, how you want Blizzard to use him in this expansion, and whether or not he should survive or join the Horde and come back with us. If you find this video entertaining or informative, feel free to like, favorite, leave a comment, and subscribe. But if you'd really like to help me out, as usual, the best way you can do so is by sharing this video and my channel with anybody you think would find it interesting. I am always looking to introduce more people to the lore, so if you're able to help me out and send people my way, I'd be eternally grateful. Make sure to stay tuned to this channel for future Warlords of Draenor lore, because with World of Warcraft and an expansion coming up, there's always more and new lore to explore. And I hope we can do that together, because it's always more fun that way. Thanks again, everyone. Farewell.